All right, let's dive right into a fascinating literary puzzle, one that comes from one of the most famous texts in history. We're going to see if we can crack the code of the unique and, frankly, brilliant writing style in the Gospel of John. So, right off the bat, the author throws us a real curveball. I mean, take a look at this. In one chapter, Jesus says his own testimony isn't true. But then, just a little later, he says it is true. So, what gives? What's going on here? And this begs a really interesting question, doesn't it? Are we looking at just a sloppy mistake? Something that should have been caught by an editor? Or is this something else entirely? Is it a sophisticated, deliberate technique designed to make us stop and think a little harder? To figure this out, we've got to dig into the author's very specific writing style. Because as you'll see, these apparent contradictions, they aren't a bug, they're a feature. Think about it. Normally, when we use language, the basic rule is that a word has one meaning in a specific context. Pretty straightforward. But the author of John, well, they love to break that rule. On purpose. It's this incredible strategy to pull you, the reader, right into the story and make you part of the discovery. So, the first tool in this author's toolkit is something we can call the art of the double meaning. It's all about using words that can be understood in two different ways at the exact same time. Okay, let's look at a classic example. There's this famous scene where Jesus is talking to a religious leader, a guy named Nicodemus, and he tells him he has to be born anothen to see the kingdom of God. But what on earth does that word actually mean? And here is the absolute genius of it. That one little Greek word can mean both again and from above. Nicodemus only hears again, and he's totally baffled by the idea. But the author wants you, the reader, to get both meanings at once. It's a spiritual rebirth, yes, but one that has to come from a divine source. It's not a mistake, it's deep, layered meaning. All right, on to the next tool. This one reveals a kind of hidden architecture within the text itself, and this is where things get really, really cool. The author uses a literary device with a fancy name, a chiasm. But don't worry, the concept is actually pretty simple. It's a mirrored structure, an ABBA pattern. Think of it like building a literary arch. You introduce an idea, then a second one, then you circle back to the second idea, and finally back to the first. It's all designed to put the most important point right in the middle, at the very top of that arch. And you can see this perfectly in the Gospel's opening. Look at this structure. It starts with the Word, then goes to the light. Then it inverts back to the true light and finishes with the Word made flesh. That ABBA pattern puts the absolute bombshell of an idea right at the center, the incarnation. It's an incredibly elegant way to highlight the main point. Okay, our final tool. And this is the key that's going to unlock that whole puzzle we started with. It's all about understanding truth through a bit of dramatic overstatement. We're talking about hyperbole, intentional exaggeration for effect. The author will state something in these absolute, black and white terms that aren't meant to be taken literally. The goal isn't factual precision, it's to make a huge, powerful comparison that you just can't ignore. Here's a great example. Jesus says, "If I had not come, they would not have been guilty of sin." Now hold on, does that mean no one had sinned before he arrived? Of course not. It's hyperbole. He's saying the guilt of rejecting him, the ultimate revelation, is so immense, so off the charts, that all their previous guilt just pales in comparison. It's like it's nothing next to this. So let's circle all the way back to where we started, that big contradiction. Now that we have these tools in our belt, the double meanings, the chiastic structures, and especially hyperbole, well, it suddenly starts to make a lot more sense. See, that first statement, "My testimony is not true," it's a hyperbole. It's playing on the legal principle of the day that you needed two witnesses for testimony to be considered valid. He's essentially saying, look, if it were only me testifying, by myself, my testimony wouldn't hold up in court. It's a dramatic statement designed to make the reader immediately ask, okay, so who's the second witness? Which brings us to the big so what question. Why? Why write like this at all? Why use all these complex, puzzle-like techniques instead of just saying things plainly? Well, there's this incredible ancient description of the Gospel of John that I think just nails it. It's been called a river in which a child can wade and an elephant can swim. And that really gets to the heart of the author's purpose. And that's the absolute genius of it, isn't it? The style is designed to be completely approachable. A first-time reader, the child, can wade in the shallows and totally get the basic story. But for those who want to go deeper, the elephant, there are these profound layers of meaning waiting. It forces you to slow down, to think, to engage. It turns the act of reading from just consuming information into an act of discovery. So this leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Realizing the literary craft at play here does more than just make the text seem clever. It can actually transform our understanding of the message itself. It shows us that how something is said is an inseparable part of what is being said. And that really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In how many other areas of life is that also true?